McLeod with the Investing News Network, and here today with me is Nick Hodge, founder and president of the Outsider Club. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Charlotte, it's good to be with you again.
It is. So the last time we spoke was back in October. At the time we talked about uranium and you said prices need to rise soon. Since then we've seen production cuts from Kazakhstan and from Cameco. Can you tell me how that's changed the uranium price landscape?
Yeah, sure. I think last time we talked I said that there were going to be some production cuts soon, and they in fact materialized I think the day you published that interview. So since that time we've seen Kazatomprom, which is of course the state-owned arm of Kazakhstan, announce supply cuts 20% over the next coming years, which is going to take a large chunk of supply off the market. We've seen Cameco do the same. They announced they were going to scale back production at McArthur River, which is the largest uranium mine in the world. And so, you know, I think that was sort of one of the catalysts the entire sector had been looking for. There's been a lot of secondary supply on the market and taking some primary supply off the market. We saw two things happen. We saw the spot price of uranium tick up a couple of dollars from 21, 22 when it happened to over $24 a pound, so that's a good thing. And we also saw on the back of that uranium equities rise some 20 to 50%. So that sort of goes to show you, I think, what I was talking about in our interview. And just uranium goes up a little bit, how high the related equities go.
Will we see more of that happening this year, or will that continue to build?
In what respect?
In terms of stocks gaining momentum, prices gaining a little more momentum. Yeah.
So I think what you're going to see is that company Kazatomprom is coming to trade this year. They're going to have an IPO, and this would be like if Saudi Arabia, which in fact they're doing too, is to like IPO their oil production. So it's a big deal in the global market, and no one's paying attention to it. And I think Kazatomprom wants their IPO to go well, and so they're going to buoy the price of uranium to help buoy the price of their stock when it IPOs, and also to make sure they have robust cash flows. So I think they're going to do everything in their power as the largest global producer, some 40% of global supply. Yeah, I think they're going to do everything in their power to help the price of uranium go up.
Can you tell me a little bit about demand? Uranium has been very supply side, I think. What about the demand story?
I think Morningstar has said that nuclear demand, uranium demand, is going to go up 40% by 2035. There's a shortfall right now. The world needs something like 172 million pounds of uranium a year. We produce 160 million pounds. We've been making up the difference on a couple of things. The DOE selling secondary supply, Japan selling some of their supply that they're not using because their reactors are shuttered. And we've also been using decommissioned warheads in a program called megatons to megawatts with the Russians. The Russian program has now ended. There's no more megatons to megawatts. We have a new administration in DC. Rick Perry is now the head of the Department of Energy. He's stopped the sales of uranium from the secondary supplies of the DOE. And Japan is now restarting their nuclear reactors, so they're working through those stockpiles that they have, and they're not selling them into the open market anymore. And so we're taking that secondary supply out, and now the mine's got to make up the difference. And that's really what we as investors have been waiting for. Because there's a lot of uranium in the world. There's just not a lot of uranium mines.
So for investors, what should they be doing right now? How should they get into this?
I mean, there's not really a lot of ways to invest in uranium, which is why it's kind of exciting. There's an ETF that trades under the ticker URA, and that holds probably most of the publicly traded uranium equities in the world. I mean, you can count the viable uranium companies in the world on this many fingers. There's not that many of them. There's less than a dozen. And so you look at Cameco, you look at Denison. I mean, those are the two biggest producers in the world. And then you look at companies that have big assets, companies like Fission Uranium, companies like NextGen. And in the United States, there's two companies that are active producers, Uranium Energy Corp, UEC, and Energy Fuels, which trades UUUU. They're the largest American producer of uranium. And if I could go on a tangent for a second, the U.S. market is very, very precarious because they need 47 million pounds a year of uranium, and they produce less than 2 million pounds. And that makes them more than 96% reliant on foreign sources of uranium. And if you remember, when we were 60% reliant on foreign sources of oil, people were up in arms, but no one's saying anything about uranium, especially at a time when all that uranium that we're importing comes from Russia and Russia-controlled companies like the Stans. So yeah, I think you're going to see that come to the fore more and more.
Do you think the U.S. government will be interested in taking action to fix that?
In fact, I think they already are. Like I said, Rick Perry has curbed the sales from the DOE. I know Amir Adnani, the founder of UEC, has been to D.C. to talk personally with Rick Perry. And yeah, the administration is very sympathetic toward bringing commodities online from domestic sources.
Okay. Anything else investors should know about the uranium market?
just that it's explosive and that you haven't missed anything yet. I gave a talk here about uranium 2 years ago when the sector was down 90%. Here we are with all these catalyst and production cuts, and the sector's only down 88% now. So you haven't missed all that much. So stay tuned, there's more to come for uranium.
Perfect. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks so much for joining me today. Once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and this is Nick Hodge.
Thank you.